Have you ever seen how aircraft take off from an aircraft carrier? You might believe they do it on their own, but in reality, a device is used to get the aircraft to produce the thrust and speed it needs to lift off. This catapult device is one of the main features of a carrier, capable of launching an aircraft from 0 to 150 knots in 2 seconds. In order to better understand what an aircraft catapult is, we have to talk a bit about aircraft carriers. You might already know what an aircraft carrier is, but for those of you who don't, it's a flight deck that's one of the most dangerous work environments in the world. It's a warship with a seagoing airbase equipped with a runway on which aircraft take off and land whenever needed. Compared to a normal runway, the runway on such carriers works quite differently due to its smaller size. With this in mind, you can imagine how hard it must be for pilots to accomplish a perfect takeoff and landing on such a small runway. In order for the pilot's job to be easier, the carriers have a few machine assistants that help them when it comes to launching and landing. One of these devices is the aircraft catapult. This device is the primary takeoff assistance that gets the aircraft to the needed speed to take off from the carrier. The catapult is a part of the CATOBAR system, or the Catapult Assisted Takeoff but Arrested Recovery. But we'll focus only on the catapult portion of the system and explain exactly what the catapult does. This catapult allows the aircraft to generate sufficient speed to take off from a limited and small runway. This method has been used for years now. In fact, the first recorded flight using a catapult was recorded in 1903 when aviation pioneer and Smithsonian Secretary Samuel Langley used a catapult to launch his flying models. Years later, in 1912, Theodore Ellison became the first person to launch the experimental catapult system. From that moment on, the U.S. Navy's been perfecting this system and has improved it over the years, resulting in the most used system on any aircraft carrier. Throughout the years, another question has emerged which asks whether or not catapults are really needed. Well, if you take a look at the size of the aircraft carrier's runway, which is about 300 feet long, you'd think that there's definitely a need for help. However, there have been some cases where the need for a catapult wasn't necessary. Many aircraft have the ability to take off from a small runway without any assistance. Before catapults became a system included on most carriers, various planes and jets would perform successful launches from the carriers by themselves. The main concern is, what if the aircraft is too big and heavy to perform on its own? In this case, a catapult is a must. But if an aircraft is small and light and is capable of doing things on its own, then taking off from a carrier without assistance is quite a simple job. Take the F-35 Lightning II, for example. It's one of only 2 fighter jets with the ability to smash that like button if you haven't done so already. But no, it's one of 2 with the ability to take off and land vertically. It's the only one that can lift off from a carrier without a catapult while fully loaded. The ability for vertical takeoff and landing could be one of the few things that'll allow an aircraft not to use a catapult. Another thing might be the great performance on short runways. Aircraft with excellent performance on short runways also don't need to use a catapult. Back in the day, before catapults were even used, many aircraft managed to lift off from the carrier without an issue. Today, the problem is with the bigger and heavier models. They need more thrust and speed in order to lift off. This requires a longer runway, as it'll allow the aircraft time to reach the speed it needs for takeoff. Catapults have proven to be a very effective system when it comes to launching an aircraft from a carrier. They have the ability to launch aircraft from 0 to 150 knots or 170 miles per hour in just 2 seconds. Usually, there are about 4 or so catapults on a carrier, which makes it capable of launching 1 aircraft every 20 seconds. Each of the catapults consists of 2 pistons that sit inside 2 parallel cylinders positioned under the deck. The pistons have a metal lug on their tip which protrudes through a narrow gap along the top of each cylinder. These lugs seal the cylinders, and through a gap they attach to a small shuttle. When preparing for takeoff, the flight deck crew is responsible for moving the plane into position at the rear of the catapult and then attaching the tow bar on the plane's nose gear to a slot in the shuttle. Then the crew positions another bar called the holdback between the back of the wheel and the shuttle. A lot of work from the crew goes into this launch. There's a different member on every part of the carrier, ensuring that each step of the process is going smoothly. Catapults are quite powerful. They can launch a fighter jet like a paper plane. For example, the catapult on the USS Nimitz uses the C-13-1. It's able to generate a substantial amount of speed with its capacity of 36 tons and 140 knots. Some catapults are less powerful than others, But overall, all of them can bring an aircraft the desired speed to accomplish a successful launch. Modern U.S. Navy carriers use the Integrated Catapult Control Station introduced in 1975 and is also known as the Bubble. The catapult control system is a focal point which eliminates various remote stations and their required intercommunications during each airplane launch. However, the usage of the Bubble is not vital for the catapult launch. The majority of the catapults used on aircraft carriers today are steam-powered. If you've ever seen a video of a catapult launching on an aircraft, chances are you've seen a steam catapult. As we mentioned, what goes on the flight deck when the aircraft is getting ready to launch below the deck is this catapult. There's steam pumped into a capsule at extremely high pressure. Once a valve is released, the steam travels up a long tube that runs the length of the catapult. The pressure released from the steam travels to a few pistons, which are locked into place until there's a signal for their release. When the aircraft is in position and ready to go, the catapult officer opens the valves to fill the cylinders with high-pressure steam from the ship's nuclear reactor, which is the reactor that brings the steam to provide the needed force. The steam then provides force to propel the pistons, slinging the plane forward to generate the necessary lift for takeoff. At this point, the catapult officer carefully monitors the pressure level so it's just right for the plane to take off. Once the force from the catapult is added to the thrust of the jet, the excess force will cause the holdback bar to release and the jet will move. If everything goes as planned, the plane has gained enough speed to lift off. If not, the pilot immediately activates the ejector seats and escapes before the plane drops into the water. However, this method of catapulting the aircraft to liftoff has proven quite successful, with a failure rate of only 0.2%. It's definitely challenging to take off from an aircraft carrier, but since the catapult has proven to be an excellent device for launching planes, many have looked into other ways to do so. Throughout the years, another system has emerged, and that's the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, or the EMALS. Now, steam catapults require a lot of steam and significant manpower to operate and maintain. Slowly, they're reaching the limits of their abilities, especially as aircraft continue to gain weight. Electromagnetic catapults require less manpower to operate and improve reliability. They're also quite gentler on the aircraft airframe, which could lengthen the aircraft's service life. The amount of steam needed to launch one aircraft depends on its weight. They have to smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. But no, in all seriousness, they have to precisely calculate the steam. If they use too much, the nose landing gear might get ripped off the aircraft. If they use too little, the aircraft won't gain enough speed to take off. The EMALS system consists of a series of transformers and rectifiers designed to convert and store electrical power through a series of motor generators before bringing power to the launch motors on the catapults. The system can dial in the precise weight of the aircraft and calculate exactly how much speed it needs to launch. They're designed for a smoother launch while reducing stress and wear and tear on the airframes. They're lighter and more reliable than steam catapults and even less expensive. The U.S. Navy has conducted a series of tests on the EMALS throughout the years. There have been a few issues with the catapults, like the failure ratio is 10% in the first tests. Later on, this ratio lowered to 0.5%, yet there's still a long way to go to reach 0.2% that steam catapults have. The first aircraft carrier that used EMALS is Gerald R. Ford, with John F. Kennedy scheduled to install and use EMALS. This system will revolutionize the way the Navy launches aircraft from their carriers and is said to eventually replace steam catapults. Bye for now.